Yeah, I've been here since I was on the street since I was 29. Off and on. I'm 36 now. I mean, when I got here, it was nothing like that.
I've been homeless for like, let's say 14 years now, 14 years, 15 or 16, something like that.
When we look at the rows of tents lining America's sidewalks today, it's easy to believe that the homelessness crisis is a modern problem. But the truth reaches much further back. The history of homelessness in the United States is a long, layered story shaped by economic shocks, policy failures, and the many moments when society turned its back on its most vulnerable people. From the early 20th century recessions and the Great Depression of the 1930s to post-war urbanization, from the shrinking of public housing programs and the deinstitutionalization of mental health care to the housing bubble of 2008, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the relentless rise in living costs each chapter added a new fracture to the system. Homelessness, therefore, is not just about statistics or tent-filled streets. It is a mirror reflecting how a nation treats those who are struggling the most. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How can one of the richest countries in the world allow hundreds of thousands of people to live without a stable home? And how did small warning signs in the past grow into the full-scale crisis we are witnessing today? This article takes you on a journey through that history, step by step, era by era, to understand how we arrived at this moment and what lessons America must finally face if the path back to a place called home is ever going to be possible for everyone. We've talked about it over and over, 650,000 homeless people in 2023 and 770,000 in 2025. Honestly, those numbers still hit me every time I read the reports. What does it say when the richest country on earth can't provide a basic place to live for more than 500,000 of its citizens? As of 2024, the United States is facing its highest homelessness count in 20 years, a reality that makes the homeless in America crisis feel more urgent than ever. What's even more troubling is the rise in unsheltered homelessness, people staying in tents, cars, abandoned buildings, or straight on the sidewalk making up almost 40% of all cases. And one thing that keeps surprising me is how often I hear people say they liked or enjoyed being homeless this year, as if it has somehow turned into a strange social trend, something we never saw even during homelessness in 2005, when numbers were high, but the cultural conversation was completely different.
And we've been trying to figure out how and where we can go about. Just some of the people don't want to be put in shelters, so we're trying to figure out where we can actually go and put up tents where the city won't bother us.
Major cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and New York remain the center of this crisis. In California alone, more than 181,000 people are without housing, a number bigger than the entire homeless population of many wealthy nations combined, fueled in part by a deep housing shortage in America that affects nearly every income level. And with the Los Angeles homelessness crisis drawing national attention year after year, it's impossible to pretend this issue is isolated. Meanwhile, the Seattle homelessness situation continues to grow, showing how the crisis has spread far beyond the West Coast and into the Midwest, the South, and even smaller towns where rent used to be manageable. So who are the people behind these statistics? They're veterans, single parents, seniors, people living with disabilities, and more full-time workers who simply can't keep up with the cost of living. Working homelessness is no longer rare. Thousands of people sleep in their cars or in crowded shelters right after finishing shifts in fast food retail or even healthcare. And we can't ignore the racial disparities. Black Americans are about 13% of the population, but nearly 40% of the homeless community. Indigenous and Latino families also face disproportionate impacts. As tents line sidewalks and underpasses and cities rush to patch the crisis with emergency dollars and temporary solutions, one truth becomes impossible to deny. Homeless in America is no longer a fringe issue. It has become a full-blown national emergency. How much progress have we really made in the past 2 decades when it comes to homelessness? Back in 2005, the crisis in America was serious, but it wasn't nearly as visible or widespread as what we see today. According to the annual Homeless Assessment Report, AHAR, to Congress, the estimated number of people who experienced homelessness that year was around 744,000 over the course of the year. Before I studied this topic, I honestly assumed it was only half that amount. Yet on any given night, roughly 335,000 Americans were without stable housing. At that time, many still had access to transitional housing programs and emergency shelters that were better funded and more structured than what we have now. Even so, the warning signs of deeper systemic problems were already showing. The national economy was expanding, homeownership rates were relatively high, and unemployment was lower compared to the years that followed. But underneath all that stability, major cracks were forming. The housing market was heating up fast. Rents in major cities were rising much faster than people's wages. And although the Bush administration introduced the Housing First strategy, an approach now widely studied in housing first history, federal funding never truly met the scale of the growing crisis. It was admirable in theory, but limited by political resistance and inconsistent government social support. The 2005 Hewett Report also highlighted that close to 40% of homeless adults were living with some form of mental illness or battling substance use. This alone should have encouraged much stronger mental health awareness especially since so many unhoused individuals were struggling in silence. It also showed that more than 1 in 4 people experiencing homelessness were part of families with children. Many of those families were pushed into instability by rising rent, unexpected job losses, or medical bills they couldn't pay. Yet despite these troubling numbers, homelessness during that time still lived mostly in the shadows of national attention. Media coverage framed it as an issue of urban decline, never as a brewing public health crisis, and long before the fentanyl crisis in America reshaped the national conversation about addiction. So the question is, why didn't we act? The evidence was already there. The people were already suffering. But the system kept treating homelessness as a local responsibility instead of a national crisis. Most federal efforts in the 2000s focused on veterans or people experiencing chronic homelessness, leaving countless others without meaningful support. Looking back, it's painfully obvious that 2005 was a turning point we failed to use. America still had the money, the time, and the political calm to address the core issues: the shortage of affordable housing, stagnant wages, untreated mental health needs before they exploded. Instead, we accepted short-term programs as if they were true solutions. And today, we're living with the consequences. In hindsight, being homeless in America 20 years ago was already an alarm bell. The real tragedy is that we heard it, but we chose not to respond. I know this is the part everyone's waiting for, because now we're stepping into what many people call the early stages of our modern-day zombie land. 20 years ago, the connection between homelessness and substance abuse was already well recorded, even though it was rarely handled in a meaningful way. According to data from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, about 38% of people experiencing homelessness struggled with alcohol dependence, and roughly 26% were using other drugs. These findings are often referenced today as part of SAMHSA homeless statistics, which show how long this crisis has been intertwined with addiction. At the same time, nearly 1/3 were living with serious untreated mental health conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or PTSD. Even with numbers, this overwhelming access to psychiatric care or rehab was incredibly limited, especially for anyone without insurance or a steady place to live. Today, the percentages remain high, but the drugs themselves have changed, and the dangers have become far more immediate. 2 decades ago, the streets were dominated by crack cocaine and heroin. Now we're looking at fentanyl, methamphetamine, and synthetic opioid substances that are cheaper, stronger, and drastically more addictive. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that fentanyl is linked to nearly 70% of overdose-related emergency visits among homeless individuals in major cities as of 2023. Yet even with this terrifying trend, only a small number of unhoused people receive medication-assisted treatment therapy or consistent support, even as public policy reform continues to lag behind the reality on the ground. And just to be absolutely clear, this video is strictly educational. We do not encourage or glorify any harmful behavior. Meth, the star drug that surged in the 2000s, arrived in an even more potent, purer form, largely manufactured in Mexico and trafficked through the southern border. As both meth and fentanyl became more accessible, homeless communities were hit the hardest. For people battling cold nights, fear trauma, and untreated mental illness, meth offered energy and alertness, while fentanyl delivered escape and a brief break from constant pain. Sadly, the combination has trapped thousands of unhoused individuals in a cycle so severe that sobriety becomes almost impossible without stable housing, mental health care, and long-term recovery programs. In many cities today, non-profit outreach programs are the only consistent form of support people receive, filling gaps that government systems have failed to address. Mental illness continues to play a major role in chronic homelessness today. Yet the United States still responds to it through emergency rooms, jail cells, or by simply looking the other way. Years of deinstitutionalization shutting down state mental hospitals without replacing them with actual community-based care left hundreds of thousands of vulnerable people with nowhere to turn. In many situations, homelessness isn't just made worse by mental illness, it begins because of it. The cycle itself is brutally predictable. Untreated mental illness leads to job loss, then housing loss, isolation, and eventually substance use as a way to cope. And recovery becomes nearly impossible when every basic need, sleep, food, safety, requires constant fighting. So the real question is, how can anyone work on healing when they don't even have a place to rest? Understanding these connections matters. Homeless in America is not simply about tents, streets, or unemployment. It's deeply tied to how we handle health trauma and care. And if we continue ignoring the root causes, we're not ending a crisis. We're just watching it unfold again and again. In the early 2000s, some politicians and media outlets pushed the idea that homelessness was a personal choice, almost a lifestyle. But that narrative was misleading from the start. The truth is that almost no one chose to be homeless. Most people were pushed into it by forces far outside their control. Losing a job, facing a medical crisis, escaping domestic violence, living with untreated mental illness, or simply being unable to keep up with rising rent while wages stayed flat. Imagine working full-time and still not being able to afford a room. Imagine getting sick, having no insurance, and watching everything fall apart. That was the reality for thousands back then, and for even more people today. When someone ends up sleeping on the street, it's almost always the result of a chain of policy failures, not laziness or poor decisions. Let's be honest, being homeless in America has never been a carefree lifestyle. It has always been a struggle to survive with almost no choices and barely any support. It's time to let go of the myth that poverty is voluntary and face a harder truth. Many people became homeless because the system failed them long before they failed themselves. Is it fair to blame the individual when the country they live in gave them nothing solid to stand on? When we talk about responsibility, we have to look beyond the person sitting on the sidewalk. We need to ask what kind of society allows so many to fall with no safety net at all. Continuing to believe homelessness is a choice isn't just wrong, it helps injustice stay alive. And every one of us has a part in that reality. Since 2005, the number of people without stable housing in America has surged, not because the warning signs were missing, but because we chose to ignore them. The root causes didn't suddenly appear. They formed over years of rising inequality, political neglect, and systems that failed the people who depended on them. The 2008 housing crash was the first major blow. Millions of families lost their homes almost overnight. Banks were rescued, communities collapsed, and renters had no safety net. Even when the economy recovered, wages for low-income workers barely grew, while rent skyrocketed. Gentrification pushed long-term residents out, replacing affordable neighborhoods with luxury development. Then came the synthetic opioid crisis. Fentanyl hit homeless communities with unprecedented force, while mental health care and addiction treatment remained unaffordable or inaccessible. Many people ended up on the streets not just because of housing loss, but because they were trying to survive untreated trauma and addiction. COVID-19 pushed the crisis even further. Lockdowns, sudden unemployment, and shelter restrictions drove thousands more into homelessness. Eviction moratoriums only delayed what became an even bigger wave once they expired. The story of homelessness in America isn't just a record of poverty, it's a reflection of our country's deepest shortcomings. For decades, we've watched the numbers grow, the suffering spread, and the policies fail to keep up. From the overlooked warnings in 2005 to the harsh realities we see in 2024, one truth stands out: when housing becomes a privilege, dignity starts to disappear. This isn't only about tents, shelters, or addiction. It's about our values. What kind of nation do we want to be? A country that protects wealth behind closed gates, or one willing to build pathways so people can return to stability? The crisis of being homeless in America is not far away, and it's not impossible to fix. It is human, urgent, and deeply shaped by political choices. We can't keep treating it as background noise. We must recognize it for what it is: a national emergency created by policy failures and a society that looked away for too long. As viewers, voters, and human beings, we each have a part in changing this story. Because until everyone has a safe place to sleep, none of us can honestly say we live in a fair country.